that I'm standing between you and lunch, so I'll try and be brief. How does this work? I'm not a technologist. Here we go. So just like change is always great, right? But there's a couple of reasons why we think we need to do things differently in the future compared to how we've worked in the past. And a bunch of this, or probably most of you have read the press release, when was it, like 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago, a while ago. So one thing is that science publishing is maybe just a tiny little bit about more than just the article. Who knows? We'll find out. And also that APCs are probably not the greatest idea that has ever been invented, at least in hindsight. So we think a lot of things may be changing, will be changing. We don't know what exactly they're going to be replaced with or enhanced with, but we need to be ready for it. That's why we are making some changes. So we're basically starting to build a digital platform. And I know the term platform can be misinterpreted. So it's not about building, I don't know, another Etapon or Silverchair or whatever. So it's by platform, we really mean infrastructure that consists of a bunch of services that ideally work well together, are properly modular, etc., etc., etc. So basically, this platform can contain third-party services, third-party software, homegrown software. It will be a mixture of that. And then there's a couple of engineering principles and some other bits and pieces that methods that we apply while doing this to avoid falling into a trap we've fallen into before. So I'm not going to say the A word right now, but there's always this ghost of an unsuccessful attempt at building a peer review system a couple of years ago. And we don't want to go down that road again. So this is fairly standard these days. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but we definitely think that whatever our future infrastructure looks like, and that's probably also true for a number of other players in the publishing space, is definitely API-driven and service-oriented architectures. And that's been around for, I don't know, 20 years. But it's still, like in talking to colleagues in publishing, it's still sometimes a very strange thought, because we have these entrenched service providers that deliver very monolithic solutions. And like once you're locked into these environments, it's difficult to break out of the cage. Again, like all of these things are not really novel. Just one or two things I want to pick out here, and that is the Strangler-Fig approach, which is going to be quite central at what we'll be doing over the next couple of years. This is, again, like 20 years old, so nothing new under the sun. But basically, it's how you go about replacing legacy software. I mean, the old model would be, okay, capture like a shitload of requirements and build a new thing, and then you switch over. And there's a very high risk associated with that. We've tried it, we failed, so we know. And then the other, like Strangler-Fig approach, is more like you have the tree, right? The old tree, and you have the Strangler-Figs growing around it, and piece by piece you strangle off one other function, one other service from the legacy system, replace it by something new. That doesn't mean you build it yourself, right? It could be sourced from a third party. And after a while, you have the empty husk sitting there and hopefully die off. We'll see. So, like, I don't know, talk to me again in 3 years, and then we can see how that went. But it decreases risk, right? Because even if at some point you end up in a situation where you say, well, like these 15 functions, features, services, whatever, we can't really replace because that would be too costly or too risky or, I don't know, for whatever reason. Well, yeah, you can still leave like the legacy thing in place to provide business continuity and continue to run your service. Then like build more innovative things left and right of that. Bit more concrete, so first thing we did over the last year, which is also important when you talk about all this AI or IA, intelligent automation stuff, is you actually need the data, right? So you can't do any AI stuff without having proper data. So there was a lot of effort going on there. That was a pretty diverse data situation to and we cleaned it up, and we now have a very scalable environment. A couple of the tools are out there, but basically moving away from here's these 1,735 ETL scripts that someone has written 15 years ago. That person is no longer there. Nobody knows really like what it does, but it runs at 2 a.m. in the morning, if it runs, to a situation where we can actually have like move to a not really a low-code environment, but at a level of abstraction that allows us to manage this. And even if key people would leave us, which I, of course, don't hope, we would be in a situation where we can actually pick this up and hand it over to someone else. Next big piece is coming up. What we'll be focusing on in the next couple of weeks is actually, and that's been mentioned today already as well, identity, because we think it's pretty central to research integrity as well. If you don't know who you're talking to, well, right? So it's, at the moment you can just show up and say, hey, I'm Christian Kohl, I'm associate professor for nuclear physics at the University of California, and that's it, right? That's an assertion I make and I don't have to prove it. And that's probably not something that's, it's not an ideal situation maybe. And then the other piece we'll be working on is managing events in state, which is basically, if you combine that, it means workflow. So basically, who are we interacting with and what's going on? And once we get that sorted, and we have proof of concepts for both already, so that shouldn't be too long, hopefully. We're going to move on and take a look at our, well, if we were talking e-commerce, the first customer touch point, right? So that's the submission experience, which is at the moment not optimal from a user-friendly or UX perspective, and also customer care piece. And so there's a lot of potential there to enhance both the quality for the author and the experience for our colleagues, automating tasks that are currently done manually, which is just sometimes, well, yeah, you all know about this anyway. And at the same time, we're also focusing on internal stuff, a lot of RPA, so process automation, making sure we, well, sort of industrialize our processes, right? Automate them, instrument them, with an initial focus on finance and sales operations, but really not limited to that. And ultimately, the goal is really to make sure we move away from a situation where, like, I need another report, right? And then you go and build a report, to a situation where you have data as a valuable asset and enable people to do whatever they need to do with that within the boundaries of proper governance, of course. So that's all pretty boring. I mean, it's also exciting to do it, but it's like all of this, like these concepts are 15, 20 years old. The fun thing is really about how we're going to do it. And this really, I'm really thankful, Anne, for your presentation earlier this morning. Really ties into that, because it is a significant change to how we go about doing this, moving away from the command and control project model to a more agile, cross-functional way of doing this. So basically, having a bunch of cross-functional durable teams, so they're not just around for a year or 3 years' time, they're meant to be durable, and empowering these teams to take ownership and responsibility. We're also not going to split it up between development and maintenance, so like the team is responsible, they have to eat their own dog food, as my American colleagues like to say. I don't know where this obsession with dog food eating comes from, but it's an idiom. So that's the first step, and that means, like going back to what we heard in the keynote this morning, you have to trust people, right? So someone has to start, like someone has to trust people that this is the right way to go about it, and fortunately, that's what we were granted, like a certain amount of trust. The other thing is that these teams will focus on outcome, not output. So it's not about delivering these 17 features that were in the backlog. It's about delivering something that really makes something better for someone, in very generic terms, which is a difficult change. It sounds small difference in the words, in the spelling, but it's a huge change if you come from a traditional project organization. And that also means that, of course, these teams need to be accountable, right? So it's not just like go ahead and do something and then we'll see how it works. So that's the good old Spider-Man thing, great power and great responsibility. And the last bit is really about, again, picking up themes from this morning, that the teams will incrementally research, design, and implement ideas. So there's a lot, like basically experimentation baked into that. We actively want people to experiment and fail and learn from these failings. We decentralize decision-making in building these teams. And we want to normalize risk-taking in a sense that if it's reversible, go ahead and do it, right? If it's not reversible, we should probably have a conversation with a couple of stakeholders first and think about it. But basically, this is hopefully going to be the engine which allows us to build some really cool and open infrastructure over the next couple of years. We also see, we also know, of course, that some of the things we need can't be built by PLOS or by any single publisher. So there's definitely a need for collaboration with the wider community. And if anyone wants to collaborate, you know where to find us. And thank you for your attention. I'm catching up some minutes, so we can have lunch on time, but I'm happy to take questions, of course. It's lunch or questions?
So keep this quick, given lunch. Sounds like a great opportunity to really rethink that experience for your customers. But I was just going to say, you said about starting with identity, and I was just going to say, if people weren't aware, there's been an SDM report released in the last few days around trusted identity in academic publishing. So it's the first of 2 reports come out from a task and finish group looking at how we can verify and confirm when people say, you know, who they are, is it really them? So if you haven't read it, it's definitely worth a read.
Yeah, and that's I think important to highlight that, because again, like we don't want to reinvent the wheel, and we don't want to fall into the not invented here trap, for sure. So if like others have solved parts of the problem, that's definitely welcome. Same with like the STM research integrity experiments that are going on. No more questions? Lunchtime? Good. Thank you.